Hello my friends, I'm Rich Larson and I'm the IRC Tire Guy. Today we're talking the 2024 ePure Sport, the base model from Electric Motion. Before we get into my thoughts on this bike, I always have to preference my reviews on electric bikes with this. This review is purely performance based. I know electric vehicles in general are an extremely volatile subject. In this case, I not only care about the performance of the motorcycle, but how I feel when I ride the EM. Often feel is the most important part of a motorcycle to me, and how I feel when I ride this thing may surprise you. So, as I said, this is the 24 ePure Sport, the base model. Electric Motion every year drops 3 versions of their electric trials machines: the ePure Sport, ePure Race, and ePure Comp. Essentially, the Sport is the base model, Race is the middle of the line, and the Comp is the special order machine. I've never tested the Comp, but I definitely hope to test it in the future. So the beauty of this year's base model is price point. Price point has been a comment I've seen on a lot of the eMotion stuff I've posted in the past. That's why we're starting here. And the main reason we switched from the 23 ePure Race I previously had to the 24 ePure Sport. So, just for some context, the 2023 Race came in at almost $11,000. The 23 Sport was $9,300, but didn't come with a clutch. I've said it before, but that's a deal breaker for me. I need a clutch when riding trials. Well, this year's 2024 ePure Sport comes with a clutch and has a price point of $89.99. $9K MSRP. Cheaper than the previous year's Sport, which didn't have a clutch. As we move through this review, we also find the 24 Sport is essentially the same as the 2023 Race I was on last year, give or take a few things. I hope you followed all that. They're making these bikes not only competitive, but competitively priced. This is about the price range of the 250 or 300cc gas-powered trials competition we see. Now, when talking price point, I mentioned the 24 Sport is essentially the same as the 23 Race. So let's talk the similarities and differences. We see the same frame, motor, battery, and clutch. From what I understand, they've upgraded the 24's transmission, sprocket, gearing, and mapping, which was a huge difference to me, and I'll break that down a bit later. From what I see, the places they cut costs are the rims. They're more on the inexpensive side. Different bars, same battery display from 23, where the 24 Race gets an upgraded screen and the adjustable mapping. The biggest difference we see is the suspension. On the 23 and 24 Race models, we have the Riger two-way shock and aluminum forks. On the 24 Sport, we see DLC-coated steel tech forks and a tech shock. The Riger shock on the Race models has more adjustability than the tech shock on the Sport models. The DLC-coated forks on the Sport are much heavier than the aluminum tech forks we see on the Race models. This is one of the whys for the Sport model being 7 pounds heavier than the Race. Just to break down weight, you can absolutely feel 7 pounds in trials. It's not a deal breaker, but I think that's where you're paying a bit more for the top-end Race and Comp models. A bit more adjustability and lighter weight. So there are a few questions people always ask when I get asked about the 24 Sport. Would you take the Race model in 23 over the Sport model in 24? This is where we talk mapping. Every ePure model I've tested since 2022 has seen significant improvements on mapping every single year. I will say, if you rode a 21 or 22 model, the way the 24 feels is completely different. This is where I get excited about the potential of electric bikes in trials. I can't believe how tractable the 24 models are in slick situations. There are times when I'll be on an icy section and the bike will just creep along, never spinning a tire. With this Sport model, of course, I want the upgraded suspension, but if I had to choose between the 23 Race or the 24 Sport, I'd pick the 24 every time, strictly for the huge difference in mapping. I also detect an almost oscillation in the motor's tickover. Listen here. That almost uneven idle can be felt through the RPM range. To me, this is mimicking a combustion engine, which is something I think we will see more of as these electric bikes develop. I've gone back and forth between gas-powered machine and electric machine in pure slick situations, and I hold better traction on the e-motion. Another question I get is, would you be better on a gas-powered bike? I think it depends on the situation. As I said, in slick stuff, I'll choose the electric motion every time. When riding trials with buddies on gas-powered bikes, I can usually out-track everyone in those slick sections. That being said, the only place I find the gas advantage is on really big obstacles. I can handle pretty big stuff on the EM. The only place I see a big difference is that top of the power range. Let's say I'm hitting a big splatter. On the gas 300, I can approach the obstacle much faster. This gives you a little more confidence in making it at least to the top. On the EM, you have to approach slower because the top end power does seem to fall a bit flat. If I enter too fast, I won't get the proper torque needed to get up the obstacle. The fact is, the EM has so much torque off the bottom where you're supposed to ride a trials bike. This actually forces you to approach splatters and other larger obstacles with technically proper form because, well, you can't depend on that top end power to pull you out. That's the biggest area where I may be better on a gas-powered machine, but honestly, it's even everywhere else. In fact, like I said, I actually prefer the electric in certain situations. Some of you might get after me for this, but I may or may not have sold my gas-powered trials machine. Now, one of these preferences that stands out to me surrounds maintenance and reliability. So, first off, there is very little maintenance on the EM. No gas, no filters, no coolant. With less moving parts than gas-powered machines, this is a bit less worry. We change the oil the same as a gas-powered bike, but of course the transmission and clutch are a bit simpler. Although I will say if something was to go wrong motor-wise, I suppose I wouldn't really know how to approach the problem. There is definitely a simplicity that comes with electric, although I suppose that simplicity is a veil over the obscure world of electronics. At least it's obscure for me. That being said, a common thing I hear when talking electric vehicles is battery life, both in terms of charge and cycles. I've mentioned this before in the gas versus battery comparison we did. The EM lasts about 4 hours of hardcore trials riding. I did a trials competition that was 6+ hours, and we were still at 55% at the end of the day. Of course, there was a lot of waiting around during the event, but for any one-day competition, this battery is more than enough guaranteed. But let's talk cycles specifically. Once I did the math on this, it was really surprising to me and shows, as far as reliability, what this bike can do. Electric Motion claims 1,000 battery cycles. So for me, ideally, and since I got the Sport, I do 2-hour trial sessions 4 to 5 times a week. This is probably quite a bit more than the average trials rider. These are heavy sessions. I'm not just sitting around, I'm riding. So hypothetically, if I do a 2-hour session 5 times a week for the life of this battery, this would mean I would have to charge the battery every other ride because the battery lasts 4 hours. So if I stuck to that every week, every year, it would take over 7 years to wear out that battery if it lasts the claimed 1,000 cycles. Now, would the bike even last that long? I personally haven't had any maintenance problems motor-wise in any of my EM history. So let's lay out a conservative scenario and say no problems motor-wise while putting that amount of time, 5 days a week, on the bike for a year. Keep in mind, I put well over a year on the 23 race with no problems, so I'm not being overly generous. That would still be over 500 hours on the machine. On a gas-powered side, consider putting the same amount of time on the bike. Just with the cost of gas in the tank and a top end, let's say every 150 hours, that would probably end up being more expensive or at least the same as whatever maintenance is needed eventually on the EM. To me, it's something that would be worth considering when you look at the final price. With EM being competitively priced, let's just say it's an interesting debate. I keep saying it, but it's not like I'm all about electric bikes. I just love this bike for what I've been able to accomplish on it. I think because it's electric, that made it easier for me. Although there is just this undeniable feeling I get about the future of electric bikes in trials specifically. Just this week, we see the possibility of a 4-speed transmission on the future electric motions. Plain and simple, it's exciting. I don't know about the future of motocross with electric. Admittedly, it's harder for me to picture silent bikes blasting off the line at Supercross. It's undeniable there is something to be said about the visceral quality of the engines roaring. I absolutely love it, although I don't see trials as being quite as visceral. Sure, loading the bike for a big splatter is cool, but the sport is about form and technique, balance and control. It's already pretty quiet. It's sort of like golf. This is why I see such a future and potential for electric bikes in this discipline. The problem is, even when you say you like something, certain people tend to pigeonhole you as with them or against them. If I say I like everything, 2-stroke, 4-stroke, or electric, and state my case logically, there will inevitably still be someone out there that says, well, if you're for that, then that means you're for this, and this ends up being something terrible. The fact is, often I don't think certain people actually care about your opinion. They care whether or not your opinion aligns with theirs. Dirt bikes, motocross, hard enduro, or trials, it's a microcosm of everything. Something to think about. I'm going to keep riding, and I'm going to keep enjoying it. If you're enjoying the channel, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, as well as follow us on Instagram at IRC Moto, my personal Instagram page at RichLarson511. And until next time, keep riding.